Hello and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today I have Jeff Hoehn on. Is that how you say
it? You're giving me that look like, did I say it right? So it's actually Hoehn. So like, I don't know if you're familiar with this brand, but Hoehn's underwear. I'm not related to them, but that's how you pronounce it. It's okay though. Nobody ever gets it right. So I just, it is what it is. It doesn't matter.
There you go, Jeff Hoehn. So today we are going to be talking about something that I have been posting a lot about recently because I've been getting so many questions on training and building muscle and things. Like, as much as I get questions about something to do with fat loss or something to do with metabolism, the thing is, regardless of what you do, you cannot just diet your way to your goal body. And then people freak out. It's mostly the fact that a lot of women freak out about feeling fluffy or wanting to stay lean or attaching to a leanness state. And that was the thing that held me back for a very long time, because I never wanted to let go of my leanness. I never wanted to let go of the scale fluctuating around like 3 kilos. Like, I wouldn't want to get over a certain kilo because then I'd freak the fuck out. And this is the problem with so many women these days. And I had, in my last post that I put up about this, there are 3 different things that people do. One is people can't detach from a certain weight. The second is they finally detach from it. They start to eat some food. And then about 4 weeks in, 6 weeks in, oh, I need to go back into a diet phase. And then the third one is that they don't realize that muscle actually weighs something. So they go into a bulk, and then they let body image come back and then go out and then go back in and then go back out again. But I think talking about this one, it's mainly focusing on one post that I ended up putting up at the same time as Jeff, which was really good because I want to talk about this in as much detail as we can. The reason that people get fluffy or don't see the results they want in a maintenance phase or a growth phase is because you don't see results straight away. You don't look in the mirror and be like, oh, I feel really good today. You half-ass it. Like, oh, I'm not in a fat loss phase, so I'm just going to half-ass this. That is why. Like, metabolism is a lot more dynamic than just a spectrum of deficit to a surplus. I said this to my girls the other day because they're like, I'm eating 500 calories more and I feel leaner. I'm like, because you're actually working with me and you're still putting in effort versus last time where it pretty much just went to fat. So I guess the topic of this is, if you aren't putting in the same effort into your building phase in the gym and in everything that you do, walking around, just the mindset of it, that is why you're not getting the results that you want to get and why you always freak out and revert back to safety. Take it away.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on. I appreciate that. And yeah, I think that this is definitely a big issue. Like you said, too many people just, they want to change their body composition. And I think it's mostly done through, they just think that they're going to like kind of fat loss their way through it, right? A ton of training, just kind of diet. And, I definitely think that people know how to do that part of it, right? Like, we all know how to drop weight, how to diet for fat loss, right? Like, we have to create that calorie deficit, right? But I think, and people take that phase seriously, but then when they get into anything outside of that, they don't take it as seriously, right? Like, for example, during a fat loss phase, people will track their macros, right? They'll track their steps, whatever it may be. And then the minute they'll track their weight, whatever it may be, measurements, any of these things that they'll track during fat loss phase. And then all of a sudden the fat loss diet's over and they don't track anything anymore, right? And at this time, like, this is when so we'll take this from post diet to then like into a building phase, right? So like post diet, say you did diet for fat loss, you know how to do that, you lost a bunch of weight. What you see happen a lot, right, is from that point, people will not do anything, and then they gain all that weight back, right? And then usually more. And the reason they gain more back is because they're in this state where they're just depleted, right? Their body's depleted. Their body wants more food. And so like, if you just go from tracking everything and then to just kind of being like, oh, the diet's over, whatever, I'm going to do whatever. It's like, you're just setting yourself up to overeat, because again, your body at this point is depleted and it wants literally anything that you give it. And so, you know, and it also craves calorie dense foods, right? So calorie dense foods are things that, you know, your tasty foods, right? Think of your snack foods, things like that. Like your body's going to crave that type of food. So, you know, you think, oh, diet's over, now I can start to include a little bit more of that. And then it's really hard to manage your appetite. Like it's hard to manage the amount. Like it's hard to portion control that type of food, right? So next thing you know, people, they stop weighing themselves, they eat this way for a couple of weeks, then what, they're 10, 15 pounds up, whatever, just kind of a made up number there on that, but they're up from where they were when they started the fat loss diet, right? And that's just a common mistake that I see happen a lot. And so like, I think we need to start from the beginning where like, honestly, that post-diet period is just as, if not more important, to continue to do the things that you were doing in terms of like tracking and whatnot. I think it's just as important to do it then, if not more important, right? So you do that for a little bit. And if you can start to do that, you're already going to set yourself up to be in a better place to build muscle past that point, right? So I think that's kind of, just start this out. That's where mistake number one is people go from being 100% on, fat loss is over, then they're 100% off. And that's where they see all this weight gain. And now, you know, you're in that position where, again, your body at that point is going to prioritize mostly fat gain at that time. You give it too many calories. So it's just going to pretty much be all body fat that you gain during that time. And you're just already kind of in a not so great position to begin a building phase anyways, right? So I think that's kind of where we should start with that, right? And say that, like, again, it's important that in that post-diet period, you're still tracking something, and that's going to set you up to be in a better position to build muscle past that point.
That I also want to say that this is exactly why you need to be in the right place before you go into a calorie deficit and before you choose to diet. Because if you're going into this with the wrong mindset, whatever happens after that is going to be pretty much on the same mindset that you started with. Like if you come into it just wanting a scale weight, or just wanting to lose fat, or just wanting to get skinny or lean or toned or whatever, you're going to find it hard to let go of that. And you're going to attach a lot of moral values to food. Now, something that annoys me is this whole intuitive eating bullshit, which I've already spoken about a million times. But there is no such thing as intuitive eating after a fat loss phase, for one. And for two, you can't just intuitively eat if you have not yet learned. Like, you can learn how to eat in a fat loss phase, that's cool and all, but that doesn't mean that you've learned how to maintain it, because your diet should not even be sustainable to start with. I tweeted this morning and I can't wait to put it up. But your diet should not be sustainable, because the diet you use to lose fat is not the diet you use to maintain it and then build. But if you don't develop the habits, the systems, the environment, the mindset of someone who can actually sustain it, then you're going to fall off. And the way that the body primes you to put on fat after a fat loss phase, and the fact that your leptin signals are still going to be suppressed, as in your leptin signal is the one that makes you hungry. You're the one that makes you full. That stays suppressed. The one that says that you're full, you're satisfied, but your ghrelin and your appetite hormones that want you to eat increase. So your food choices matter. And you still need to be 100% on track for the few weeks after a diet. Then you can actually start to add in some flexibility. Now, something that you also can lead this into is, just because you are not dieting per se, like, it's mainly the mental barriers that stop us from pushing that further, because we can get past that bit that you mentioned with making the right food choices, still tracking the food and putting the effort in there. But then the mental part comes in, where it's just like, oh no, I'm going to lose all my progress. Oh no, I still can't eat this food. Like, we can still become very anal with the types of food we eat and still create this restriction mindset, which is then when we blow out.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. So basically you're saying there, like, it kind of the mindset towards it is super important, like during this time as well, in like going into a building phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I actually wrote kind of a blog on this. So if we maybe want to take this in the space of like, hey, this is mentally like how you could potentially deal with a building phase. I think that might be a good route. Are you okay with that?
Yeah. That's the one that I was referring to. I had the title of your blog there, because then you also mentioned about being scared to see the scale go up.
Yeah.
And also that was it. That one. And then we'll talk about the exercises later.
Yeah. Cool. So again, I think kind of like we said, again, so you have that part where, all right, you've dieted, now you're at least like tracking a little bit, and now you're at this point to where, okay, you know what, Ruby tells me, hey, I need to build muscle. Okay, now I'm in that phase, I'm ready to do this, right? And so I think some things like you can do to kind of help you mentally deal with the building phase. And the reason I brought this up was because, like you said, it's a mental thing for people, right? Like the reason they end up getting in this cycle of like not seeing progress is because they, like you said, they see a little bit of weight come on, or the scale isn't trending down. So then they cycle back into fat loss, right? Or they think that they're going to just build like a bunch or put on a bunch of body fat. And so like, these are things that kind of scare people away from doing these things. And it makes sense. Like I've been there before, you've been there before. Like, I think that a lot of times we think this is just females that go through this, but I think this is a big deal for males as well, right? Like males deal with this almost, I would say, you kind of are shaking your head. I feel like you agree that they probably do it almost just as much as females do, right? Like they're just some guys are just as scared to gain any amount of weight either. I
would actually say that males sometimes could be worse, because they look to other males, be like, I want to be strong, I want to be a powerlifter, I want to be this, that, the other. But then as soon as you start doing that, oh my God, I'm gaining body fat, blah, blah, blah. And then it's both the same.
Yeah, it really is. And so like, but we know that in order to really like change your body, like it's not done during a fat loss diet, right? Like that's going to kind of show off what you've done, but you're really going to change your body by putting on some muscle. Okay. Like, again, if you really want to transform your body, like I think that like has to be super important to you. Otherwise you're probably not going to be super happy with like where your physique is going, right? Or your body. So again, you need to take time away from dieting, and whatnot. And so I feel like this phase is challenging for a few reasons. For one person, like getting away from fat loss, dieting in general is a problem. So like eating more food for them, like scares them, right? Like you have that. And then another type of person doesn't fat loss diet often, but the thought of putting on any amount of body fat, like scares them, right? So,
I want to relate to this one just so it's relatable for the audience. And I don't know whether I want you to talk about your clients as well, if they struggled with this, because something that I get a lot of feedback on with this podcast is, honestly, guys, please reach out to me when you hear things that resonate with you, because it makes me want to talk about those things more or bring up those things more. But my girls love anyone who listens to this. They message me saying I related to that story. Now, because I am 5'2" / 156 centimeters, and my body structure, like my hips, literally touch my rib bones. So I can't have a waist. And I've always wanted to look at, like, I've looked up to these other people being like, I want that body. And I spoke about this before. You cannot have someone else's body. You do not have their structure. But because of that, every single thing that I tried to do to build muscle, I would freak out because I hate my waist. I don't have a waist. It goes to my belly. As soon as I start eating, the first thing that other women talk about is it goes straight to my belly. Well, no fucking shit, because you're focused on your belly, one. And two, when you eat food, you have food in your stomach. And if you have a horrible relationship with your body and food, that is not going to go down well in that pathway, which is why you need to be okay with it. And I feel fluffy. I feel big in the gym. I feel bigger. Like, I feel chunky in the gym now versus when I was hardly, like, when I was eating at maintenance or even lesser calories. I can't even imagine eating in a deficit right now. But the difference is that you have a lot more food in your system. You're not hungry as much. And you probably will feel not only full in your belly, but full in your whole body. So that fear, you need to be so aware of it and realize that it's normal. And you need to actually sit with it instead of trying to crush it. It's more so realizing that fear is normal, but something you can also bring onto the mental side. But this is why it's actually really important to have a coach, not just for losing weight, because you can do things the wrong way. And most people I see when they do this kind of stuff is that they don't prioritize the right foods. Like the food quality you eat matters so much more. Like if you do not prioritize food quality, sleep and stress, which Jeff and I will talk about later, your body composition is going to go to shit. And that is exactly why you gain fat, not muscle. Continue.
Yeah, no, those are good points you bring up. And like you said there, I think the reason that people freak out about that and think that they're gaining a bunch of fat is it's more mental than anything. Again, you have a little bit more food in your system, and like you just kind of, in your mind, you think that you're gaining a bunch of weight. You see the scale go up a pound or two, you think you're gaining all this body fat. Now, every time you look at yourself, that's kind of the frame of mind that you're thinking of. And so then our brain is very powerful and our thoughts are powerful. And so like, you kind of start to like see that, right? And so I think that that's important to let people know. And I agree that having a coach during a building phase, honestly, is probably more important than, it's all of it's important. I think it's great to learn all of it, but like you said, it's almost just as important. But to go back, so like basically those are kind of the big fears, but like both situations are slightly different in what I mentioned, but like they both come from a fear of putting on body fat and thinking that you need to look your best 100% of the time, right? I think ultimately that's a big thing there. And so like building muscle takes time. We know this. It's a slow process. It just takes much longer than fat loss does, right? Fat loss is quicker and you get more of that immediate feedback, like you mentioned it with fat loss, right? So you're going to get that right away. And so I think this makes building phases just not, it makes it, if not more mental than fat loss phases, right? So I think that it probably is more mental than a fat loss phases, but the rewards for building muscle and taking time to do a building phase are going to pay off long term. This is like more an investment into your future, right? So I kind of wrote this blog going over like, what are some things that can, like, we know this is going to help improve your physique, but you have these issues going into it. So like, what are some things we can do to like help you deal with that mentally, right? And so the first thing I came up with was set goals. Okay, so we want to make sure that during this phase we're setting goals, like, because again, during a fat loss phase, you have that goal of seeing the scale go down. Okay, so like you kind of have that feedback there with it, and like that's kind of the goal. Like you're kind of looking better day after day. But when we go to a building phase, you kind of have to change your thought process on it. And like, you're not seeing that like day-to-day change anymore in terms of your physique and also seeing the scale go down. So with these goals, they can be strength goals, right? You can maybe switch it to more performance oriented type goals. It could potentially be a weight goal. But this is where it's also super important to where it can also be things like improving your energy levels, your sleep, your relationship with food, right? Like these are all things that we can kind of like work on. And now, again, I know those last few are more, they're a little bit tougher to quantify than say like weight or like strength goals. But again, this is where having a coach, like you mentioned, can really help you with these types of goals, right? So I think changing your focus, but also again, setting goals. And so like one goal that if I have a client with a building phase is we're going to aim for like a weight gain per week amount. Okay. So this is kind of off topic, but like, I don't think in every situation you necessarily need to be in a surplus for a building phase, but either way, I think setting some sort of goal, like weight goal is super important. So like, again, having that weight gain per week goal, and you're going to base this off of your body weight, right? And so the reason you want to do that is because this is, again, we know the big problem for people not wanting to do a building phase is fat gain. And so you do this because if you control like how much weight you're gaining per week, you're going to minimize how much fat you gain, right? So that
I do want to say something on there as well, because I actually get rid of the scales if like, I'd rather not use the scales at all, but something I do want to say with that mindset that can be useful to anyone listening to this, because I really heard a lot of people have fucked off the scales for this type of thing, unless you fixed your relationship with it, is if you're a female and you're calling this a bulking phase, you really need to have a good look at what you're doing, because as a female, you should not be bulking one, and you should not be in some stupid surplus two. Like when the word reverse means you get your ass up to maintenance. I'm so just out there with my words, but Australia. You get your ass back up to maintenance, and then you slowly reverse up from there. Whatever you want to call it, the reverse happens after the maintenance, because you don't want to go, hey, maintenance, oh, let's just slap on all these calories. Like when I built my calories up, I slapped mine onto 2,800 because I thought that was going to be a surplus for me by like 100 or 150. I guessed, but it didn't. I stayed the same. And I only weighed myself, like I would weigh myself for a week and then leave it just to get my average. And then I'd leave it there. And then I'd do it again. until I calibrate where I'm at. And then I'd leave it until I feel like I need to do it again, because I don't give a shit about the scale. It's just data for me. If I feel like my mindset's going to fuck up over it, I don't even bother with it. I will just do body checks. I will just do my progress photos. You need that awareness before you can even think about a scale. But back to what I was saying with that thing is the mindset around realizing that there is going to be some weight gain is super important. And I want you to insert into this conversation just how important muscle is, because it's the one that I shared with Sal about, just like muscle is more than just a look. Like, yes, it is exactly what you need to get that body that you want, because you'll never get it without muscle, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for one, off the top of my head, like building more muscle is the first thing, like I said, is going to be, you're going to partition your nutrients better, right? Like your insulin sensitivity is going to be better. So you build more muscle, and like your body's just going to do a better job at utilizing the nutrients you give it, right? So that's the first one. I think that's super important. And then the next thing is going to be like, while muscle itself isn't necessarily going to like raise your metabolic rate, like by itself, like at rest, having more muscle is going to allow you to be at a little bit of a higher body weight, which in turn is going to allow you to, you're not going to see your energy expenditure drop too much because of that, right? Like, I think that's a big problem with people's fat loss goals is they just lose a bunch of weight. Now they're a smaller weight. Now they burn less calories overall because they're a smaller weight, right? Whereas, and they don't have as great of a look because they're just smaller. They're more like skinny fat, right? Whereas you build muscle, like you're not going to see your weight like go down a ton, which you could in certain situations if you're overweight. But if you're normal weight, like you don't necessarily want to see your weight go down too much, because then you're just going to not burn as many calories overall for every movement that you do, right? Also though, like, so from like a metabolic standpoint, there's that, food standpoint, but also like, again, we know it just looks better overall, right? Like it's going to be more aesthetically pleasing, but also it's going to make you stronger. So everything you do, you're just going to be stronger, right? It's going to help with bone health because you're lifting weights. Like these are other things that are just going to help you like with overall health too, and long-term longevity, right? Whereas again, you get your common person that wants to get into fitness, they're kind of new to it. It's all weight loss, right? Weight loss, weight loss, weight loss. And that's the only thing they focus on, when like, that's great. And for some people, they do need to lose weight, but most people just need to like, just build muscle. Almost like I hate to say it like that way, but like they almost just need to build muscle, right? Because again, it's going to help you long term too. Because again, you go the route where you just lose weight. That's usually what a lot of people want to do, and it's like you don't build any muscle in the process because of your methods. And it's like long term, like I just don't think you're in a great place.
Go listen to my podcast with Richie Cohen if you don't know the importance of building muscle, because you're not just overweight, you're over fat but under muscled.
Yeah. Well, and to like, I feel like as far as like muscle's very energy demanding in terms of like maintaining and building it. Like it does use a lot of energy to do that. So like in today's world, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, go with this one. This one is really important.
Yeah. And in today's world, I think that's super important. Again, to go back to when you just go with that weight loss approach, like you are like kind of down regulating your metabolism overall, right? Like you're just not like building it up. And when you build muscle, like it kind of keeps your metabolism like kind of roaring in a way, right? And that's just so useful in today's world where we just have a bunch of this calorie dense food around that it's just super easy to eat 3,000 calories without really having to try, right? And so like what we want to do is we just want to try to build your body up. I think that too many people build their body, they tear their body down when they go through the just a weight loss process, when we need to be building it up, right? So and it's just super helpful in today's world. Like if you would go back thousands of years ago when we evolved, like okay, it makes sense maybe not to have a ton of muscle because there wasn't a ton of food around, right? Like we didn't know where our next meal was going to come. But in today's world, we don't have that issue. You literally can go walk 2 feet and you can get 3,000 calories and not be full, right? So like we're in a completely different environment. So like we need to work with that and not against it.
I love this conversation. One of my most popular podcasts was actually one with Dean Guido, and he literally said, you don't have a menu for a 60 kilo, what did he say? It was like a 60 kilo person. You don't have a 1,600 calorie menu. They're like, for people like that's the thing. They don't cater for people that want to eat a certain way. You need to ask for what you want. But also on that podcast, if you haven't listened to it, it's like there are 2 places in Australia, for example, that I compared. There is one in near the beaches that has literally no fast food. There's like one, and it's a Porto. And a Porto is like one of my favorite places ever. It's the only fast food place I go to because they make the best chicken ever. And I order like, because I'm kind of like that person that can just eat plain protein, but I order like 300 grams of protein, like just in chicken tenders, and that's it. Like I'm good with that. But if you go into the West, which is where I live, look around you. There's like 10 fast food joints on every road. So your environment shapes you. And somewhere that I wanted to go with this muscle conversation is actually transferring it into the gym, because something with like when they test muscle metabolic rate, that's because a lot of those people are kind of sedentary when they test it. But once that muscle is moving, it's burning a lot more in action. So walk more, train more. The way that you train, you can train with a lot more weight. Like I had this conversation with Marcy actually. I'm like, oh, what? Because I was like, I only just did 130. What is 130? I only just did 100 and no, I only just did 290 kilos for a few reps on my deadlift. And she's like, whoa. I'm like, it was only one, like, because I'm so used to like lifting heavy that that's like a normal to me, but that is burning a lot more in the gym. Like you shouldn't use the gym as a way to burn calories, but the fact is that is also a lot more muscle that's getting torn apart and needs repairing, which allows me to eat a high calorie range as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But I want to shift this towards what I think a lot of people also need to realize is that you don't need to train differently for fat loss and muscle gain, but your exercise selections do actually change if muscle building is your goal. Too many people stay married to certain exercises that don't do all that much for building muscle. Like, yes, a back squat and a deadlift can build a lot of muscle if you want to use those, but there are better exercises for muscle hypertrophy. Now, there's like if you're a powerlifter, then obviously you have to use those, but there are better exercises for goals, but it doesn't make them good or bad. I want you to actually talk about that one as well while you're talking about training hard, because people don't train at the same intensity.
Yeah. So I think what you're kind of saying here is like, when it comes to, again, this goes back to like, people are so like focused on like fat loss. And so like, they kind of see their training mirror that. Is that kind of where you want me to go with this?
That one, as well as I'm sure you put up a blog about exercise selection for building muscle, that one as well.
Yeah. And so I guess I'll hit both of those. And so like, you know, a lot of times when people, they do that kind of fat loss training, it's like more like high intensity, like just kind of going for the sweat, the burn, like circuit type training. And what ends up happening there is like, people just want to burn as many calories as they can in a workout, right? And they look at their watch or whatever. And like, what happens when you do that is you kind of start to stress the cardiovascular system a little bit more. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like that's good, like it's a good thing, but you're not really going to like change your body composition that way, right? So because again, you're not taking the muscle to close to muscular failure or the target muscle to failure, right? Because you're just stretching your cardiovascular system. Your limiting factor is that, and not the muscle that you're trying to grow, right? And so like you end up kind of staying far away from failure. And like in the beginning, you will see some results and like you will see some muscle growth because you are so like primed and sensitive to building muscle. But once you like keep doing that over and over again, and like you just get in this like cycle of that's how you train all the time, like you're not really going to see any change in your body, right? You may be able to recover quicker and whatnot. You may burn more calories in a workout, but you're not actually like going to like change your body. So that's like mistake number one. And then as far as exercise goes on the other end of the spectrum, a lot of times people they just pick exercises that aren't like great for building muscle in general. Like I think a back squat is good, but something like the deadlift, like a conventional deadlift, again, is like you said, for powerlifting, it's going to be very specific to that. But I think as you get more advanced, like something like a deadlift just becomes something, again, that it's more strength focused and it's not really targeting any muscle, right? Like it's kind of the jack of all trades, master of none exercise, where it's like it hits so many muscle groups that it's like you don't really dial in one one muscle group to hit, right? You're just hitting a bunch, like your hamstrings, your hip, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and it's also very fatiguing. So you need to be willing. Yeah. Because I'm just gonna use this as an example. When I do my deadlifts, I don't have a lot of exercises on that day because it takes me half an hour to get through them and I'm fucked for the rest of the day. And also a note on the squats as well is I actually don't do proper back squats. there are like squats and are amazing, but you can change up the way you do squats, like front squats. I do cyclist squats with my heels on like a 25 kilo plate. Like there are certain ways that you can alter things to help with muscle growth. Continue.
Yeah, no, I think as you get more advanced, like that certainly becomes a thing that you want to do. You want to like, you almost want to find a way to like do the least amount of weight as you can, right? Like, I don't want to say the least amount of weight. Like you don't want to like aim for nothing, but like you do want to find ways to kind of manipulate your body to where you get more stimulus for less muscle, right? Because you're going to get less fatigue. That kind of goes to this thing that Dr. Mike called the SFR, the stimulus to fatigue ratio. Go ahead. I know you
I was just going to try and dumb that down for the people listening to this. So what he's trying to say is you want to use the most weight that you can for the exercise, but you want to pick exercises that make, like, for example, a 5 kilo dumbbell. You want to pick exercises that make 5 kilos feel like an RPE 10, not like you're lifting freaking purses and handbags.
Well, and another example of that would be like a Romanian deadlift, right? That's what I always try to tell people is like, okay, so yes, deadlifts I think are a great exercise, but like we can make it a little bit better as you get a little bit more advanced and like switch over to like a Romanian deadlift where like you can do less weight with a Romanian deadlift, but you really can like target your hamstrings with it, right? Like if you really have that, if you really hip hinge, right, and you stick your butt back and you get that good stretch in your hamstrings, you don't need to use 300 pounds to do that, right? Like you can use way less weight and you'll get the stimulus that you want, right? So again, I think finding ways that work best for you to kind of manipulate your body to, again, like you said, you still want to pick the most weight, but you don't necessarily just like want to have this insane amount of weight just because like you think you need to just like lift heavier, right? Like again, for example, the deadlift or like a back squat or something like that. But I know that, another thing that's important for building muscle in some ways you can manipulate exercises, or when you kind of train muscles at like lengthened positions, right? So we're talking about like kind of like, for example, I like to use a bicep curl. I get this all the time with clients where like they'll do regular curls, they don't really feel it. Then we have them switch to like a dumbbell incline curl. And like when you are doing a dumbbell incline curl, you kind of have to stretch your biceps out a little bit more, right? And every time they do that, they're a little bit more sore. So like doing things that kind of get your muscles in that lengthened position can be a great way to, you don't necessarily have to like add a ton of weight, but you get a better stimulus for every like rep that you're doing. So like if you,
I want to actually add on to that as well with the example that Jeff said, with the exercises you pick, it means jack shit if you're not taking it through the full range of motion, because even a proper bicep curl, like you can get a good stimulus with that. But the thing is, most people don't even bicep curl right. Like no one actually straightens their arm. Like a trick that I use is actually squeeze your triceps at the bottom, but no one even gets to that position.
Yeah, and I think a couple things on that. So like first, when you're in that like lengthened position, you do need to be careful, like because you are kind of putting your muscles at like a little bit of a higher risk of injury, right? So you just want to be careful. I'm not saying you're going to hurt yourself. You just want to be a little bit careful, like because you can see like if you really stretch out your arm and like straighten it out and get in that lengthened position, like if you're not careful, you can really stretch it out and hurt it, right? So you do want to be careful there. But there are times where like training in like a more shortened position and not necessarily like a partial range of motion, but like shorter ranges of motion can be beneficial, especially if most of your training is in that lengthened position, right? The thing with the lengthened position is like, that's a little bit more fatiguing. So you want to be careful that if you're feeling a little beat up, you might want to kind of switch that around a little bit to where you aren't always in that lengthened position. Hopefully that makes sense there on that.
It does make sense. Like I was listening to a podcast not that long ago saying you need, like, if you find that you're constantly sore between sessions and not able to recover, then this is why program design is an art, and it pays to actually get a coach to program for you. Because a lot of the time, like I know when I try to do my own programming, because I'm a sadistic type of person, I would like kill myself with dumb shit and I just would not recover. And then I would not see growth doing dumb shit. So it really pays to do that. And something that you mentioned in this blog as well is the fact, because it was falling in love with certain exercise, but the fact that so many people change exercises way too often. And you like, if you're still seeing results at week 4 of a program and progressing, then continue the thing to week 8. And even if you aren't seeing progress in terms of weights, there are so many other ways to progress. Like you actually need to train with intent. And like Jeff said, you can't, like, you're always going to have a risk for injury, but you reduce that risk if you train with intent, not just to lift a weight from A to B.
Yeah. And so like so basically like what you want to do is you want to just make sure like no matter what you do, you're controlling that like lowering portion of an exercise. I think if there's one like exercise tip I can give somebody to help build muscle, it's slow down in your muscle building workouts, right? Like today I literally saw somebody at the gym I was at doing curls and they're just like going up and down, like moving like this. It's like you're not doing anything. Like you're literally just adding a ton of fatigue and you're getting just very little benefit out of that, right? So anytime you have an exercise, just make sure you're controlling it on the way down. And like you said, you have that intent. So like, it's something like a bicep curl when you're lowering it, just, you don't have to go super slow, but just make sure you're controlling it. Say you're doing a pendulum squat or a half squat on the way down, just control it, right? You don't necessarily have to like go super slow, like where it's like 10 seconds on the way down, but you don't just want to like drop down to the bottom, right? Because you're missing out on a very important part of the muscle building process. And you're also increasing injury risk by doing that, right? And then like the eccentric part would also be like say you're doing a lat pull down, that would be the part where you come back up, right? Like you see people come down, they're just freaking slick.
Yeah.
Just driving it down super quick and then they're just letting it come back up, right? Like on that, again, you want to come down a little bit quicker, do what you need to do, and then slowly, raise it back up again with control. Because if you don't, again, you're going to increase injury risk, but you're also not going to get the benefit of that exercise.
Yeah, this kind of warps around this whole topic that we spoke about for this first half of the podcast, and that's the reason you aren't seeing the results you want in the gym is because you aren't giving it the same 100% effort that you did the fat loss phase. And it's still that mindset thing where if you attach everything to burning calories, to sweating your heart out, to whatever it is, you're never going to really see the results that you want, because that's going to lead to egotistical things in the gym. Like, I'm just going to add on another set. Oh, I don't feel this working. Oh, I did like 3 sets of leg extensions, like my program says, but I feel like I can do another one. Like, that's dumb shit. That's not going to get you anywhere, because you're manipulating variables without consistency. And I guess it's almost like you're inconsistently consistent. Like, you're always showing up, but every time you show up, it's inconsistent. So the other thing that I really wanted to talk about in this whole muscle building thing is, like, if you aren't satisfied with your look, it's a lot of the time based on the fact that you're focused on seeing the scale go down. You aren't used to the fact that muscle weighs something. And weight isn't just that. Weight is like, I could move my scale from one tile to another tile and have a completely different weight on the scale as well. Like, there is so much that consists of whatever that weight is. Like, what's the accurate number there? Is it like the 60 kilos from one? I'm just going to throw random numbers. Is it 60 kilos from one tile, or is it 58 from the other? Like, you need to have a focus. I know it's about consistency, but it's just emphasizing the fact that the scale reflects a lot. And you could have been consistent weighing yourself on one of those tiles, or consistent weighing yourself on the other tile. But the fact is, there's still 2 kilos of difference there. So you need to actually marry yourself to the process of building your body and removing the emotional attachment to the scale, to numbers in themselves, and see them as just data points. Because, like, I'm going to read out a post that Jeff actually put up because I love it so much. It's, muscle is important for weight management, long-term overall health, and improving your look. But people freak out about this because it's associated with the gym bros and flexing and bodybuilders and meatheads. And because of that, it's almost like the post that I put up. Since when did tracking calories become obsessive? Since when did walking become obsessive? The reason I put that post up is because people are afraid to have like a fitness tracker on their watch because they feel like that's obsessing over their fitness and health. But that's usually based on the environment they surround themselves with, and the beliefs they have. And the same comes to the way that people train in the gym. They find it hard to push themselves because they don't have like the mindset of pushing yourself in the gym. Like, how do you go about that? How do you help your clients go about that? How do you help them actually do what they need to do in the gym to get the results that they want?
Yeah. So like you're saying, basically, like, how do I help clients get like push themselves in their workouts to build muscle essentially. Is that kind of what you're asking there?
Pretty much.
Yeah. So what I like to do is, so I like to have like a kind of a intensity kind of way to gauge intensity, right? So like, for example, RIR, like we'll use RIR for clients. I'll give them a rep range and we'll look at it, right? And so that rep range, again, I think people get too caught up in like exact rep ranges, right? So like with that, we use this RIR system to ensure that, so RIR is reps in reserve, right? So basically we're just trying to gauge your intensity to where it's like, we don't want you to be too far away from failure, but we also don't want you to be like always going to failure every time. So it's like a good way to do that, right? Because again, if you're in your workouts and you're like, again, to go back to that like example I gave of people like kind of focusing more on cardio, you end up being far away from failure. So like you do a lot of stuff in your workouts, but you're not eliciting the adaptation that you want, right? So it's like you're getting a bunch of fatigue and like you're doing a bunch of work for not really what you're trying to do, right? So this is why we use RIR to make sure that like we're getting somewhat close to failure. And again, failure is very subjective, right? Like it's very subjective from person to person. But I think the biggest thing is like making sure that, let's say you're doing a lunge, like we just want to make sure that like your quad is the limiting factor. Like if you just breeze through a set and like you feel like you could do, like say you're doing 8 to 12 reps and you grab 15 pounds and you get to 12 reps and you're like, okay, that set's done. Jeff said 8 to 12 reps. I stop at 12. I'm done, because that's what it calls for. But if you could have done like 10 more reps, it's like you're leaving results on the table. Okay, so that's why we use that RIR. So
I love that last bit that you just said, because the only reason I don't use RIR and RPE is because a lot of people don't know what failure feels like.
Yeah.
But what Jeff just said is exactly why. Because if you get to rep 12 and you feel like you can do a heap more, then either do a heap more and see how many you can do until you literally give out so you know what failure feels like, or increase the weight and then see how many you can do there. Like actually test yourself to go to failure to see what you're capable of.
Yeah, figuring that out, yeah, it's super important, right? And so like at that point you would just kind of adjust the weight. You could add more weight, or again, like you said, just do more reps and get closer to failure. And so, because like if say you don't do that, like are you going to not build any muscle? No, you still will like build muscle in these workouts, but you essentially just have to do more, right? You just have to kind of do more to see results. And like you can't always do more, because then there's fatigue that you run into, where like when you just keep doing more, like your body's gonna be like, whoa, we gotta chill out. We can't just keep doing more, right? So basically, again, we want to make sure that we're improving. I always tell clients we want to work on our quality, not our quantity. Okay, so quality is super important for building muscle. Again, if you do 3 sets of an exercise and you don't really feel anything, like that means we need to look into our quality. So what does that look like? Quality is again going to be things like slowing down. Like just make sure you slow down in your set. I guarantee you, if you slow down, that's going to take away a big problem that people have of not training intense enough in their workouts, right? So slowing down. But also quality can also be like focus as well. Like a lot of times, I know I've done this before, and I know clients do this, and I'm sure you've done this before too. Focus meaning like, stop thinking about like, hey, what exercise are you going to do next, or when's this set going to be done, right? Because I think again, we see 8 to 12 reps and it's like, oh, I'm just going to try to get through this as quickly as I can. It's like, no, you got to stay focused, and like you have to focus on each rep, and I think those two things are going to help you improve your quality, and therefore help you with like making sure you're training hard enough in your workouts.
I really loved that part, because that's something I used to be guilty of as well. Like I'm doing a leg extension, and I know, like, actually, look, let's start with squats. I would start a workout with like my squats or whatever, and I'm already thinking about the fact that I need to save myself for the rest of the workout. And if that's the mindset you're going in with, you're not going to get the best results out of what you do, because you need to put in 100% every single time. And if you're stressing out about how fatigued you're going to be at the end of the session, then I would reassess the way that you're approaching that in terms of your nutrition, your sleep, all the other stuff outside of that. But also, you're not meant to freaking PR your leg extensions at the end of your session every single freaking week. Like, people have this mindset that they have to be progressing every single bloody thing on their program. Like, it doesn't work that way. And you're not even going to progress every week. Like, your 100% effort one day may actually be less weight than the previous week, but it's still 100% effort. So you're still going to progress in that session, regardless of whether it was a little bit lighter weight or not. It's just that you had other factors outside of the gym session that made the weight a little bit lighter, because load is a tool in the toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely. Load is not the only thing you need to increase. I think people definitely, what happens when we just focus on load is then your quality kind of suffers, right? Because then it's like when things get too heavy, it's like your technique breaks down, right? Now you're increasing your injury risk. You're also like lifting heavy now, and you're putting more stress on like joints and other muscle groups that should be recovering, right? So that's just going to add fatigue. So, we do want to be careful with load. Like you want to walk that fine line with it, because it's like, you do want people to increase, like you don't want to be scared to increase weight, but you also can't go too quick either and like just add weight. And that's the only way you think you're going to progress, right?
I do want to say on that note as well, it's, if you actually train the muscles the way they should be trained in the exercises, you are not going to have joint problems and all these other problems. Because the only reason I ever got those was because I was training like a dickhead. Like, if you train properly and actually focus on training the muscles, not just moving a weight, you strengthen the muscles, which then strengthens the muscles around the joint. And if you have a smart program, it's not going to do or bias something like, oh, let's just do a push. Oh, let's just train your legs in only this way. Because if you do it that way, then yes, you are going to have problems. Like, there is balance needed in a training program. But I really wanted to sum up this whole conversation on why it is that your food quality, one, is super important in a gaining phase as well. Otherwise, you're going to end up wondering why your body composition is bullshit. Like, on many factors, the fact that it improves your energy, your sleep, the way, like your body performance, like your body composition in general, and the vitamins, minerals, protein, blah, blah. Also, why sleep and stress management are so important. I want to really sum it up on that, because it's not just about food and training. If the other stuff is not on track, that leads to a host of issues, both in a fat loss phase and a muscle gain phase.
Yeah, so I'll start with the food quality thing. Food quality is still important in a building phase or when you're outside of your fat loss phase. Again, I think this goes back to people's mindset towards this is, oh, I'm not on a fat loss phase, so now I can eat whatever I want. I don't have to worry about it. But again, a lot of people are afraid to do this because they don't want to gain body fat. But then they also like feel like they don't need to focus on what they need to eat. So like that's kind of a mismatch there, right? So for one, food quality, improving your food quality is going to be helpful in terms of a weight management standpoint. You're going to be able to, you're not going to see that weight spike up too much, right? Because you have good food quality, right? But also with this good food quality, we're also going to ensure that we're getting protein in, which is going to be super important for building muscle, right? But also with food quality, you're going to make sure that you're going to be getting the essential vitamins and nutrients that you need, vitamins and minerals that you need to help put you in the best position to build muscle, right? Like basically, if your diet's mostly processed food, tasty type food, because you're in a building phase, so you're just going to eat whatever, like you're probably going to be missing out on food that's going to make you feel your best. So then your training's going to suffer, right? And then you mentioned sleep, like it could affect sleep. Your weight's going to start to jump up, right? So food quality is super important in a building phase, and we still want to make sure that we are focused on that. Now, you mentioned stress management. Stress is going to play a role because, again, all stress falls under the same bucket, whether that's training stress, stress at work, stress in a relationship, it all falls in the same bucket, right? And so like you can think of the more stress you have, the less you're able to like recover from your training. Okay. So like if you're super stressed all the time, like that's going to take resources away from you being able to recover from your training, right? So that is going to affect muscle building short term and long term. And so, yeah, with the stress like that's one thing that it will do. But also I think that we still want to be stressed all the time anyways, right? Like who wants to do that? So it is going to affect, like, that's how stress will kind of affect it, right? It'll just lower your capacity to recover. And then when you lower your capacity to recover, you're going to be at a higher risk of injury. And again, like the big thing is muscle is very energy intensive to build and to maintain. And again, you're kind of taking that away, that your body's ability away to do that. Also think about this from like a evolutionary standpoint. Like if you're constantly stressed, like you're just kind of sending that signal to your body that, hey, like we have to take care of this first. So it's going to put muscle like lower on the priority list, right? Its goal is to lower that stress and deal with that. And again, it doesn't know the difference between work stress, training stress, or again, how we used to deal with stress was back when we used to have to hunt for our food is, it could have been a tiger coming after you or something, right? Like your body doesn't know the difference between that. And so again, its goal is to lower that stress, and like that is going to affect building muscle. And then the last one was sleep. You mentioned sleep. Sleep's going to play a big role. There was a study one time where basically they put two people in calorie restricted diets. One group they had get regular sleep. Another group they had them like kind of sleep restricted, and they both lost weight. However, the group that was sleep restricted lost more weight from muscle mass than body fat, right? So, or they lost more muscle mass than the group that slept 8 hours. So like we know that sleep hurts muscle growth, right? And the maintenance of muscle. So there's that. And then also from the insulin resistant side of things, it is going to hurt that. Like you're not going to be as insulin sensitive when you're not getting good sleep. Also, like, you're just not going to be as energetic. So you're less likely to go and have a good training session, right? So those would be kind of like the main things I would say. Like if sleep is off, like that's how it's going to affect your muscle building. And one other thing on that too, when we get poor sleep, we also tend to crave tastier foods the next day, and we tend to overeat, right? So that's another thing where if sleep is off and you're scared of going into a building phase because you're going to gain fat, well, your poor sleep is going to be a big reason as to why you're going to maybe eat some extra calories and potentially gain weight, right? So that's like one way to help combat that.
Yeah. If you aren't looking outside of the gym, you're missing out on like 22, 23 hours of the day. And not only that, you only really have 3 to 5 days of training. So then what happens on the weekends? What happens with all this other stuff? Like it is just as important to monitor in a fat loss phase as it is a building phase, because one day doesn't just impact that one day. What you do on one day will impact what you do on the following days. And I guess to sum this up, I am going to quote this tweet. It's: seeing the scale go down, up, or stay the same does not automatically mean an improved or decreased look. What that weight is made up of is going to play a much bigger role in regards to an improved look or not. And something to also add on to that is that the scale is literally the worst progress tracker in terms of long-term progress, because like now compared to like 5 years ago, whatever happened in between there, how much does the weight tell the story of what your body looks like? Like literally think about that. What happened in let's just say 2016, 2017 to 2020? What happened in 2019 to now? Like COVID, lockdown, all that shit. Like what happened in between there? What happened with the scale between there? What happened with your body between there? And it's not even just like smack bang from the beginning to the end. Your body also changed in between all of that with all the different weight changes too. But the before and the after of the weight, like it's just ridiculous that people put so much of the emphasis of pass or fail on the scale. So I guess to sum that all up, what would you have to say about how to actually build the body and not just see it as a weight loss process?
Yeah. So how would I so I'm sorry, I'm a little confused there on that. So how would I what now?
So
sorry.
usually people just have the goal of, I want to lose weight, I want to get trained up, but that's not going to build a body. So how would you sum it all up to get that message across?
Yeah, I think that if your only goal is weight loss, like you're not going to be putting your body in a good position to build muscle, right? You're going to be doing things that are going to cause weight loss, and those adaptations are going to be completely different than building muscle, right? And so if your only goal is to see the scale go down or just weight loss, like just realize that you're going to be missing out on maximizing your physique and how you can look, right? Because again, what you need to do to lose weight is counterintuitive to what you need to do to build muscle. So that would kind of be how I would sum that up best there with that.
Yes, that I'm not even going to add any more to that, except the physical and the mental of everything he just said is so important. So with that, I hope you gained a lot from this episode, because we went quite a lot into the building aspect of it, because if you aren't getting both sides of the spectrum right, you're missing out on 85% of the pie or more, because you want to only have about like 10 to 15, maximum 20% of the year losing weight, depending on where your starting point is. If you're not paying attention to everything that we were pretty much talking about in this episode, then you're leaving so much of your potential on the table.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's perfect. I love the 85-15. I think that's a great way to sum that up.
I am going to leave your Instagram handle in the description. Is there anything else that you want me to add in there?
Yeah, just my blog and podcast. What I'll say on the blog is we kind of dove into my mentally how to deal with the building phase, and we kind of dove into that a little bit. There was some more stuff on there, so I would maybe push people to that if like mentally they're having a hard time wanting to do a building phase. So I can send you the link to that, but I would definitely push somebody to read that, just to get a better idea of how to deal with it from the mental side of things, and make sure you're like good up there to crush a building phase.
I'll put that link in the description as well, so send me that one through. So
Yep.
With that, you will listen to me all on the next episode.